Toucan Play That Game is proudly sponsored by NiceGameShop.com, the place to go for rare and unusual Asian games. Hi, I'm Michael. Take a seat and I'll teach you how to play Stone Age by Z-Man Games. A game where we're going to take on the role of chieftains of tribes in the Stone Age as we go foraging and building huts and just trying to build our tribes up to be the best tribes out there. Start setting up the game, have each player take a player board and the wooden components of their colour. They'll also need 12 food that they'll put on their player board. 5 of the wooden figures they'll have on their player board, 5 they'll just set aside for later in the game as a reserve. The big and little cubes will go on the main game board, with the little one going on the 0 space of the agriculture track and the big one going on the 0 space of the score track around the outside of the board. You'll then place the dice and the cup near the board on the table, stack the food tokens in the hunting ground, then place the wood tokens in the forest, the clay at the clay mound, your stone in the quarry, and the gold on the river. Then sort your double-sided tool tiles into 2 piles and place them in the middle of the village here, so that you have your 1 and 2s in one pile and your 3 4s in another. Then shuffle all the civilization tiles and reveal 1 on each of the 4 spaces of the board. Next, take all the building tiles, shuffle them up and place a stack of 7 tiles for each player. So in a 2-player game, you'll have 2 stacks. If it was a 4-player game, you would have all 4 stacks. The unused tiles return to the box. And that is the game all set up. Give your youngest player the first player marker and you're ready to begin. The aim of the game is to get the most points before the game ends. And there are 2 ways the game can end. Either you're unable to refill the civilization cards at the beginning of a round, or one of these stacks of building tiles is completely empty. The way you'll be getting points is you'll be taking turns placing your villagers on various locations on the board. And then once all the villagers are placed, resolving your villagers. You'll gain points for set collecting the various symbols on these cards here, as well as points for these multipliers here that will give you points for certain things. So points for number of villagers, points for number of buildings, and you'll also gain points for completing buildings. Each round of the game is made up of 3 phases. First phase of the round is to place villagers. So starting with your first player, they will pick somewhere to place villagers. Now each of the circles on the board here can only contain 1 villager, except for the big hunting ground one over here, which can contain any number of villagers. The player is not restricted to only placing 1 villager when they're placing. They can only place in 1 location, however, and some locations, such as the builder's hut here and also the agricultural hut here, only have 1 space, so only 1 villager can go there. The breeding hut, however, can have 2 villagers because it's got 2 spaces. The forest and all the resources spaces have 7 spaces, so a maximum of 7 villagers can be placed there. And of course, you can only place as many villagers as you have. So at the beginning of the game, you only have 5 villagers. So we'll say the red one goes there, and then the blue one will place 2 villagers in wood here, because they want to get some resources. It would then be the red player again and the blue player until neither player has any villagers left. Also, in a 4-player game, it's important to note that any number of players can go to the different locations as long as there are spaces. However, in a 3-player game, only 2 players can go to each of the resources spaces. So that's the forest, the clay mound, the mountains and the river. And in a 2-player game, only 1 player can go to each. Even if they only put 1 villager in that location, the other player can then not go there. And also with the 3 village locations, once 2 of the locations have been taken, so here the agricultural and the builder's hut, The third location cannot be used in a 2 and 3 player game. In a 4 player game, all 3 locations can be used in a round. And of course, this could change next round. You could have people in the breeding hut and end up with the agriculture being vacant and unusable. Then in phase 2, players will resolve the actions of their villagers. So you'll start with your first player and they'll resolve all of their villagers in the order of their choosing. So if we say it was red here, in this village here, they'd resolve all of theirs and then it would be blue's turn. So let's go through what the different locations do, and we'll start with the village locations. So the agriculture hut here, you simply increase your agriculture rating by 1. And I'll explain what that does in the next phase of the game. Your villager is then removed from the space and placed back on your player board. The tool maker here allows you to take a level 1 tool or upgrade an existing tool, which is then placed in the first space of these 3 squares here on their board. The next time this player goes to the tool maker, they'll take another one and place it in the next 3 space, and so on for the 3rd time. However, the 4th time that they visit, they'll, instead of taking a new tool, upgrade their top tool to a level 2. Once they've upgraded all to level 2s, they would then take a level 3 and replace one of their level 2s. Once all are upgraded to level 3, you would then start upgrading them to level 4. The hut here requires you to have 2 figures in it, and you'll remove these figures and place them back on your board along with another figure from the reserve. So this gains you new figures to be able to place in future rounds. For any of the resources spaces or the hunting ground, you'll place a number of dice equal to the number of figures. So if we were doing the forest here, 2, in the cup, and you'll then roll them. Then divide the result of the dice by a number based on this conversion chart. So 2 for food, 3 for wood, 4 for clay, 5 for stone, and 6 for gold. So if I'd been rolling for gold, I would only get 1. However, I've got a tool on my player board. Tools you can use once around, and you turn 90 degrees when you use them, and they add the value of that tool to the dice roll. So that would make this a 12, which would have got me 2 gold. However, if it's a high value tool, so say it was a 2 that I used, and I turned it and I used it, the leftover 1 just gets wasted. You can't carry it over to use elsewhere. And of course, I can't then use that on any other rolls this round. But I wasn't rolling for gold, I was rolling for wood. So I'm dividing by 3. So we have 11 at the moment. If I did do the tool, that would get me 4 wood instead of just 3. You need full numbers. There's no rounding in this. So if you don't meet the full number for a wood, you don't get it. The resources you get, you'll simply add to your player board. Another location you could go to is one of the civilization cards. So when you go to a civilization card, there is a circle on each card that you place your villager on. The space the card is in represents how many resources it's going to cost you to gain this when you come to resolve your villagers. If you come to resolve your figures and you can't afford to pay the cost, then you simply take your figure back without taking the card. The cost is 1 resource, and it's important to note that food does not count as a resource. So to buy this, I could give up 1 wood, placing it back in the supply, and I would then take the card. These cards have 2 sections to them, the top water section and the bottom land section. The top water section will be an immediate reward that the player will gain, and the bottom section will be towards endgame scoring. There are 2 types of bottom sections. The one here with the symbol on the grass is part of a set collection. For each unique symbol you have in a set, you'll get a certain number of points, as shown by this table on your player board. The other bottom sections relate to these symbols here, and again you'll get a number of points equal to the number of people times whatever the symbol is. So in this case, each tool would give you 1 for each person that you have with a times tool. Here it would be huts, here it's figures, and here it's agriculture. And you can have multiple of these and they will stack. When you take a card, you will place it face down on here so people don't know what you're heading towards with endgame scoring. You can, however, look at it yourself during the game. The exception to this is the cards that have the one-use tools on them. These you will place next to your board until they are used. Once they are used, you will then place them face down. I'm not going to go through all the different civilization cards, as there is a leaflet that comes in the game that clearly explains all of these. The final location is building tiles, and again they have the circle on so you can see that you're placing on the specific building tile you wish to buy. The cost is given on the bottom, and you can see there are victory points at the top of the tile. If it comes to resolving your figures and you cannot afford it, you'll simply take your figure back and leave the building tile. If, however, you can afford it, so here we have a wood, a clay and a gold, which will all just go back to their relative supplies, you then take the building tile and place it on one of the 5 spaces here. If you end up with more than 5, you'll simply stack them on top of each other. You then immediately score the victory points noted on the tile, moving your cube that many spaces along the track. Once all players have resolved their figures, it's time to move on to phase 3, feeding your tribe. At this point, you'll have to give up food equal to the number of figures you have. So you're always going to need at least 5 food. However, this is where your agriculture comes in. For each point of agriculture you have, you don't need to pay a food. So in this situation, if I had 5 agriculture, I wouldn't need to pay any food. But I don't have any, so I have to pay 5 food, which goes back to the supply. If, however, you are unable to feed your tribe, you give up what food you can, and then you have the choice. You can either, if you can afford to, trade resources for food at a rate of 1 food for each resource, no matter what it is. So in this case, they only are short 4, so they could give up all their resources, but giving up gold for food seems quite bad. However, if you're unable or choose not to trade resources, then you immediately lose 10 points. And it's always 10 points, no matter how many figures you have and how short you are of being able to feed them. Once everyone has done this, it's the end of the round and it's time for a new round. So everyone resets their tools, the first player marker is passed to the left, and then you refill your civilization cards, sliding the cards that are there to the right so that they're on the cheapest spaces, and then placing out new cards in the empty, expensive spaces. If you are unable to do this, say we were out of cards and we could not fill this space here, then the game is over. The game would also be over if at the start of a round one of these stacks of building tiles is completely empty. Then all that is left is to do the final scoring. If it's not the end of the game, you'll just proceed to the new round, played exactly the same as the previous round. For the endgame scoring, players will reveal the civilization cards that they have and compare to the chart. Looking first for sets of unique cards, so in this case they have 2 duplications, which are those and those, so they're going to have 2 sets, and then they also have 2 cards, so they're going to have 1 set of 4 and 1 set of 2. So if we look, a set of 4 will score 16 points and a set of 2 scores 4 points, so they score 20 points for those. They then also look at how many points they're getting for these. So they would get 2 points for each building that they have, because they have 2 workers for buildings. They would get 1 point for each figure that they have, and they would get 5 points for each tool that they have. And finally, each resource other than food is worth 1 point each. Once each player has totaled up their score, whoever has the most points wins the game. And that is how you play Stone Age by Z-Man Games. I do hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have, please do take a look at the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as sharing and subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.